Have you ever found yourself in a situation where your mind jumps to an impossible conclusion simply because it's so absurd that you can't believe it? Well, that's where I am right now, and I need your help. I'm stuck in a dilemma where neither choice seems right, and I'm starting to suspect something about my wife that I just can't bring myself to believe. No, it's not infidelity. I know that's a common concern, but I don't think that's what's going on here. At least, I hope not. Let me explain. My name is Alex, and I've been happily married to my wife, Linda, for several years. She's not without her flaws, but overall, she's a great partner and makes me very happy, and I try to do the same for her. I also have an amazing job, though the downside is that I travel a lot. The trade-off is easy for me because I earn a good salary, but it's not as easy for Linda. She's become quite suspicious and paranoid lately, but this wasn't how she was when we first started dating. I met Linda in college and we quickly became close friends. She was the one person, besides my childhood best friend Brian, with whom I could share personal things. Brian and I were inseparable, and as Linda and I grew closer, we eventually started dating. At that point, she seemed perfect, which was a bit intimidating, as it made me wonder if she was hiding something. But since we had been such good friends for so long, I thought I would have noticed if she were keeping secrets. A few years later, we got married and moved in together, and everything seemed great. Until now. For those curious, Brian is still my best friend, and he's married with a family nearby, so my friendships have stood the test of time. Now back to the story. A few months after we got married, I started noticing that Linda had become a very distrustful person. She didn't try to hide it, and when I asked, she admitted that she felt insecure and that my frequent travel made her scared someone might take me away from her. I won't lie, it can be a bit annoying having a paranoid wife, but at the same time, it's kind of endearing. In a way, it's clear she can't stand being away from me for even a moment, so she wants to know where I am and what I'm doing all the time. I won't sugarcoat it. It can be difficult, especially when we argue because I didn't answer her call, and she gets upset, but as long as you remember that it's driven by love, it helps keep the relationship going. To be honest, though, it requires a lot of patience on my part. If it were anyone else, I'm not sure the marriage would have lasted this long. Sometimes, I joke with her that she's lucky to have me, and she agrees. That's how life usually goes for us. I go to work, they tell me where I need to travel that week, and for how long, and I pass the info on to Linda. She pretends to be upset, but I always manage to make her laugh. This week, however, things were different. A few days ago, I found out I needed to travel quite far for a meeting with a client. As expected, Linda wasn't thrilled that I'd be gone for 2 days. When she gets upset, she acts like a child, and I have to work hard to convince her that I need to go. She knows this, of course, and plays along, enjoying the back and forth. After promising to take her to her favorite restaurant for dinner, she finally agreed, and we had a fun day together. The next day, I left in the afternoon. I had my meeting and checked into the hotel, and the following day, as I was preparing to leave, a coworker who had attended the meeting with me called. He mentioned that he had lost his ring and was worried he might have left it in my car. The coworker was from a nearby branch, so he had already returned to work. I told him I'd check and call him back, so I stopped at a gas station and began searching every corner of my car. While I didn't find the ring, which my coworker later explained had fallen somewhere else, I did find something much more unexpected. Under a spot I never would have thought to look unless I was hunting for something small, I discovered a tiny device that, at first glance, looked suspiciously like a tracker. I was just guessing at that point, but it couldn't have been anything else. Despite being deep under the seat, it seemed like it had been securely placed there. It didn't just fall into that spot by accident. This really caught me off guard. Now, I'd understand if I were an important person or something, but I'm not. My company always knows where I am because I travel for work, so there's no reason for someone to track me. My wife knows where I am at all times, so she wouldn't need to do that. And besides the two of them, no one else has access to my car, well, except for Brian, but even he has no reason to do something like that. To be sure, I looked up what the device was, and it confirmed that it was indeed a tracker. After the initial shock, I was really scared. Why would someone want to know where I am? Since I couldn't think of anyone close to me who would do this, I started to think the tracker might have been placed by someone with harmful intentions. Someone who wanted to harm me, my family, or my company, or something equally sinister. I know it sounds a bit extreme to jump to that conclusion, but can you blame me? A tracker is not something you just put on someone casually. After the initial panic, I figured the best course of action would be to throw off the person who was tracking me. I figured that if there was any immediate danger, I'd be putting my wife in harm's way by going home. So, I told my company that I had some issues and would return the next day. I told my wife that I had extra work to do, and then drove around for a while to see if anyone was following me. I used all the tricks I'd seen in movies and situations like this, never imagining I'd find myself in such a scenario. After a while, I was pretty sure no one was tailing me, so I returned to the hotel to think things through. The most baffling part of all this is that the tracker was placed by someone I don't even know. So how did it get there? No one else ever touches my car except for me, my wife, and my best friend. My wife is the one who cleans it because she enjoys it, so it was clear to me that it would have been impossible for someone to place it without one of us noticing. As I was trying to piece things together, my wife called to ask where I was. This struck me as strange because I had already messaged her. Although she's paranoid, she usually trusts me enough to understand. But this time, she started doubting me, accusing me of lying, and repeatedly asking where I was going. This was odd to me, especially after I had just discovered the tracker. I showed her via video call that I was still at the hotel, and only then did she sort of believe me. This made me suspicious of her because it's possible that her distrust of me led her to put the tracker on my car. She's the only one I think could have done it without me noticing. But at the same time, it seemed completely absurd because I've never done anything to fuel her distrust. I couldn't imagine my loving wife doing something like this, though, because she would have thought about how hurt I'd be if I ever found out she didn't trust me. Still, the idea that she might be behind it lingered in my mind. I didn't like the thought of it, so I decided to let it go and just go home. However, I didn't take my car home. I left it at a friend's house to see what would happen, and then went home on foot. My wife was furious when I arrived, repeatedly asking me to tell her the truth. She refused to believe that my car had broken down and was in the shop for a few days. What confused me the most is that she didn't even pause to consider whether I might actually be telling the truth. You'd think that after all these years, she'd be able to tell when I'm lying. But it was as if she had already made up her mind not to believe me. As much as I hate to think about it, this has made me even more suspicious of her. But I don't want to believe she'd be capable of something like this. If it is her, it means she doesn't trust me at all, even after knowing everything about me for so long. So, I'm reaching out. Please tell me what I should do. 2 weeks later, I spent a lot of time thinking, and I don't mean just a day or two. I spent an entire week turning this over in my mind. A few days after my last post, my wife's anger seemed to disappear. She apologized for her behavior and told me she was just worried that her intuition had told her something was off. She asked me once more if anything had happened, and I reassured her that nothing had. Then she asked me to bring the car back, which I did. She seemed somewhat surprised by that. It was easier to suspect my wife when she was angry with me, but when she returned to being her loving self, it made suspecting her 1,000 times harder. Every time I considered the possibility that she was behind this, I felt an overwhelming sense of guilt. Several times I almost told her everything, but something told me I needed to investigate further. After much thought, I decided I needed to dig deeper. The problem was, I'm not cut out for investigations. I knew that no matter how many clues I followed, I wouldn't be able to get to the bottom of it. So, I contacted a friend of mine from work, Timothy, who is a private investigator. I've worked with Timothy on work-related matters before, so I figured he'd be the best person to help me figure this out. I reached out to him and we met up. He kind of scared me with a warning. As soon as he realized this was a personal matter, he told me I needed to be prepared to face whatever consequences came from his findings, because he might uncover things I wouldn't like. He gave me the warning again, and by the second time I was even more scared. I felt like Timothy was only giving me that warning because he was sure my wife was involved. After all, if anyone knows how to handle a situation like this, it's him. Still, I told him to go ahead with his investigation because I thought it would be better to know the truth than to stay in the dark. But now, a week later, I'm starting to regret my decision. It seems like this is much bigger than I anticipated, and it's not just about my suspicions regarding my wife. Today, Timothy called me and said he needed a few more days to complete the investigation. He mentioned that he already had most of the information but was missing some key details. He wanted to finish everything before giving me the full picture. Then, he told me to prepare myself for devastating news. That really saddened me because it made me think that my wife was behind everything. I told Timothy that I was already ready to hear whatever it was, but he just told me it was much worse than either of us had imagined before hanging up. Now, I'm really scared to find out what's going on, and I'm almost certain that my relationship is going to end once I know the full truth. Well, Timothy was absolutely right. I wasn't prepared for the shocking information he gave me. For those of you who defended my wife, get ready for a major surprise. It's been a few weeks since my last update, and about a week after my last post, Timothy asked to meet me. He apologized for what he was about to tell me, and I was so scared that I was trembling. Then he told me that my wife wasn't the only one behind the tracker. My best friend Brian was also involved in the plan. At first, I was confused, but then he explained that my wife and Brian had been sleeping together, and the tracker was there to keep tabs on my location so they could carry out their affair without me finding out. I was completely stunned and couldn't even speak. Timothy continued to talk, saying that he wasn't sure how long this had been going on, but he guessed it had been happening for at least a year. Timothy showed me photos of my wife and Brian kissing in his car, and I immediately broke down in tears. You have no idea how much this hurt. These two people, Brian, practically family to me, and my wife are the people I trust the most. Couldn't believe it. Not just that my wife did this, but that my best friend was involved too. Then Timothy told me he wasn't done, and there was more bad news. Over the past few months, my wife had been asking me to transfer the house where my parents live into her name. When I started making money, I bought a big old house for my parents, and after getting married, Linda and I moved into a house they gave me. I told her I could transfer the house to her, but she said she didn't want to move there. She just wanted to own it. She made it seem like it was fair since we both had homes. I never thought we'd separate, so I agreed, and I told her we'd do it in a few months, but after that I didn't think about it again. She never reminded me, probably to avoid raising suspicion. Then Timothy told me that her plan was to take the house, kick my parents out, and then leave me. Couldn't believe it. My wife isn't like that. But when Timothy showed me a blurry recording of a conversation, I had to accept it. If none of this had happened, I probably wouldn't have believed him, but after everything else, I had no other choice but to trust him. Timothy then asked me what I planned to do. I told him I wasn't sure that I needed to think about it, but deep down I had already decided. I wasn't going to let her and Brian get away with this. I treated them like family, and they both betrayed me. I would have done anything for either of them, and it cuts me deeper than I can put into words. You can probably understand why I decided to get revenge. After that, I set up small recorders just like Timothy suggested, throughout the house and in our cars. They're really good quality. I also installed hidden cameras to capture as much evidence as possible. My plan is simple. I'm going to create fake documents transferring the house to my wife. Once she thinks the house is hers, she won't waste any time executing her plan. And when she does, I'm going to expose both her and Brian in front of everyone. A week later, I had everything I needed, so I told my wife that I had made arrangements to transfer the house to her. A few days later, she reminded me, and I told her I had already started the process. I signed the fake papers and handed her the house, and she seemed genuinely happy about it. During this time, I hadn't hung out with Brian in weeks, and it was starting to feel off. So I forced myself to go out with him one night. Every second felt awful, but I did it because I knew that in the end, it would be worth it for the revenge I had planned. A few weeks later, my wife put her plan into motion, exactly as I expected. She went to my parents' house and kicked them out, claiming she was leaving me and that the house now belonged to her. Of course, I acted completely unaware of what was happening. I reached out to my in-laws and set up a confrontation with her, bringing both my parents and hers along. I also called Brian and asked him to come to my mom's house to help clean up the mess. I made sure to call him at a time when I knew his wife was with him, so he had no choice but to bring her. When we arrived at the house with our parents, my wife's mother asked what was going on, and Linda began to spin a victim story. She claimed I was a terrible husband who drank all the time and hit her whenever I wanted. She also accused me of forcing her to have abortions, even though she had wanted children. She said she tricked me into giving her the house and was now leaving me because of all the abuse she had endured. She was so convincing in her performance that I almost thought she deserved an Oscar. Then, right on cue, Brian and his wife arrived. It turned out Linda had been expecting her friend, Brian's wife, and it was all part of their bigger plan. I continued to act like I had no idea what was going on and asked Linda what she was doing. I told everyone that her story was a lie. That's when Brian stepped forward and confirmed Linda's story, saying he had witnessed some of the things she had described. He said that Linda had asked him for help, and although he loved me, he couldn't stop me from becoming a monster. I have to admit, they played their parts well and the family seemed convinced. At that point, I figured that was enough drama, so I told them to come clean or else. They didn't give in, so I revealed everything. How Brian and Linda had been sleeping together and how it was all part of their plan. Watching their shocked expressions was almost amusing, as there was no way I should have known any of this. I then presented the proof, recordings, photos of them kissing, and even videos of their secret meetings. Timothy had also given me more evidence, which was incredibly helpful. With all the overwhelming proof, my part in the drama was practically over. Linda's parents just stared at her in disbelief, and when she tried to explain herself, her mother slapped her on the spot. At the same time, Brian, who was trying to speak to his wife, was also slapped. I told Linda that the papers were fake and that we were done. She broke down in tears. My mother-in-law then told Linda that she was cutting her off from the family and didn't want anything to do with her. I also told her that she would soon receive the divorce papers. Meanwhile, Brian's wife told him they were done too. He got furious with me and tried to hit me, but I grabbed him and threw him to the ground. My father called the police, and Brian was arrested. After all of that, we kicked Linda out of the house. Now, my mother-in-law is apologizing to me, but I told her it wasn't her fault. When I got home, I found Linda waiting outside, begging, saying she had nowhere else to go. I told her I didn't care. It's been almost a month since then, and we're deep in the middle of the divorce process. Brian's wife also moved out and filed for divorce. As for Brian, he's not doing well. You won't believe this, but a week ago, he contacted me asking for help. He begged me to help him pay his bills, saying that as an old friend, I should help him out. I told him he didn't deserve to be called a friend. Even enemies would have treated him better, and I let him suffer. The last I heard of Linda was that she tried to return to her family, but no one accepted her. Her parents made it clear to everyone that she was no longer part of the family. After that, she lived with some friends, but they couldn't offer her much support and eventually kicked her out. Now she's practically homeless. As for me, I'm doing okay. Well, as okay as someone in my situation can be. I'm making this update because many people have asked about my life and whether the divorce is finalized. Yes, it is. Everything is looking better, especially now that I'm no longer legally tied to her. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks ago, and those 3 weeks have been the best I've had in a long time. Brian and his wife finalized their divorce before mine, and if Brian was already struggling with money, it's even worse now since he has to pay alimony. I've heard that Brian has tried to get back with my ex-wife. During one of the divorce hearings, she told me she no longer saw him and suggested we could start over. I replied that we could, but it would be on our own separate paths. She started crying audibly, and her lawyer had to console her. She looked at me as if I were the villain in all of this, which I found rather amusing. My lawyer advised me to keep the conversation as brief as possible with her, and that's exactly what I did. I don't understand why she thinks telling me she's no longer seeing him would be enough for us to get back together. That's not what I want from this divorce. I just want to be free of her. I know some people have called me naive for not recognizing the signs, like how she controlled me when I went on trips. Many say that should have been a red flag to end the marriage, but let me explain. It's not that simple. For people on the spectrum, it's harder to spot these things. That's why working with computers and servers, especially when I travel, is easier for me. They're more predictable. I chose that path at university because, as you can see, I'm not great at negotiating or reading people's intentions. I don't want to justify myself, but I felt it was important to explain why this hasn't been as easy for me as some might think. I wish things could be different, but it's something I've lived with all my life. I could share many stories of people who've taken advantage of that, but I'll stay focused on the main issue. I also wish people wouldn't exploit it, but at least I'm not naive enough to think that everyone will treat me well or that life will always be easier. I didn't expect it from my own wife, who swore to love me and be faithful, only to betray me. Because of this, my expectations are much lower now. Still, I won't deny that this has happened to me many times in my life, and I can't promise it won't happen again. I don't want to end this story without mentioning Brian, though, because it's something a lot of people have been asking about. While I've already said he lost the case, at least when it comes to alimony, I wanted to add that he's in a pretty bad situation now, or at least that's what his ex-wife told me. She and I have kept in touch throughout this process, as I had a lot of the information she used for her own divorce, which has given me insight into what's happened with him. I can also tell you that she's already met someone new, and Brian hasn't been happy to learn that. Apparently, after everything fell apart, he asked his ex-wife for forgiveness several times. But like me, she didn't accept it. As for whether my ex and Brian are together now, I don't know. No one seems to have any information on that since I don't talk to my ex, and Brian's ex-wife doesn't know either. Oh, and I forgot to mention how my divorce with my ex-wife ended. She didn't have to pay alimony, and the house I gave my parents was in their name, so she couldn't claim it. Additionally, the house that I was supposed to inherit from my parents at some point wasn't something she could claim either. In short, she left with very little from our marriage, thanks to her infidelity. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.